improved. This included also a very deep process of review of the accountability mechanisms of ICANN. Nowadays, ICANN is on the verge of becoming a unique organization because of the things that I just mentioned, but it's going to become a more independent organization. And by being more independent, it needs even more to have accountability mechanisms that are more sophisticated. This is why for 2 years the ICANN community has been working to generate these mechanisms so as to guarantee that this new independent organization has this. I will now, well, this is the experience of ICANN. How can we think in that this multi-government can be translated into cybersecurity? First of all, it's the principle that it has to be done. And the answer is very simple. On the issue of cybersecurity and almost all the issues that have to do with Internet, since this is a distributed network, these functions are also handled or managed in a distributed way. There is not one entity that manages cybersecurity within a centrally. Then the issue of cybersecurity, there are many parts that have different responsibilities and roles. We have the colleagues from the OAS, in SIGTECH that have a very important role. Then we have the CRRs that are the ISPs, and we and ICANN also have an important role in cybersecurity, and has to do with the security of the dominion names, of the DNS. But if we think of cybersecurity holistic as a global issue, we need for all of these participants also could become or make an effort, a multi-stakeholder effort, to try to solve these issues through principles that are preferably from the bottom up, and with the cooperation and collaboration of all of the interested parties in cybersecurity. And this is where I stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. Rodrigo has indicated that he will be replaced by someone for questions and answers, so we'll still take the questions and answers at the end. Rodrigo, I'll probably take this opportunity to thank you, and probably we'll just do the switch quick with Daniel Fink. Is Daniel here? Yeah? So we'll just do the body swap. So you guys you're seeing like movie magic right in front of you. We have a body double going on. But thank you so much, Rodrigo. And then you have to catch a flight. No problem. All right, so while Daniel joins us, I would just like to welcome and ask Eduardo if he will just make his presentation.
Thank you very much. I have a presentation.
Eduardo has a PowerPoint. Yeah.
Gracias. Yo tengo un PowerPoint. No sé si lo podamos presentar.
I have his presentation in PowerPoint. I don't know. This will help us on this presentation. Is there anyone helping me in this? Well, meanwhile, I'd like to thank Olga, Adrián, and in general all of the school for this invitation to share with you a little of the vision from the perspective of an administration or a territorial dominion in this from Colombia on what to do with cybersecurity and what is the type of contribution in some way can be made from this sector and management group to this issue. And for this, I'm going to share with you the experience of what we have done in Colombia practically since 2010, when we started the management of the Dominion.com with a model of operation where the Ministry of adopted a new policy and the way of managing the Dominion. Well, let's see we're going to follow the following agenda. Following slide, please. I need some help in this. Thank you. We, as I said before, we are we are owners of the ministry TIC, and we started to operate in 2010 when we began. The Dominion had already been working for 7 years. It had started domain had started, and we had about 20,000 registered. We have 2.3 million domain names registered under .co, according to the decision made by Colombia. And these domain can be registered by any person with any residence, so that in more than 200 different territories there is a domain .co, and we function under the registrars. That is, we don't sell the domain directly to the final users, but they should be sold through a network that sells them. It's important to say that we have worked a lot trying to keep the credibility and, in general, a good level of recognition for the domain .co. For instance, all of the governmental agencies in Colombia have the .co to be identified, but also in Colombia, 85% of all of the larger companies of the country have .co for identification. At the international level, there are a lot of organizations, especially of the digital, new businesses with using digital are using the .co to be identified. From this point of view, this increases our responsibility and of the management that we have to do to keep good credibility on this area of the domain .co. So we begin our work trying to identify what we can do, on the one hand, to protect as far as possible the .co space and contribute to the security efforts in the Internet when this .co was being abused. What we did there, we began by identifying the different parts so that through sharing of information on the malicious activity of this domain, we could start identifying our identification of those who are members of the community that are relevant and generate areas for discussion. We have become members with international organizations such as those that are mentioned here, Anti-Phishing Working Group, the first organization, the one that also deals with child pornography, and in general, many other organizations that are aware of creating mechanisms for cooperation in the field of security on the Internet. Before going to the local sphere, I'd like to point out how this works, the lines of responsibility in the registration in the domain names, because then it'll be easier to understand who does what. In this pyramid, we could see the high part. The entire community has put in ICANN/IANA. IANA is the authority that assigns names and numbers, domain names and numbers, and the registry in this case, which are the .co, has a direct relationship with these organizations. And this is where the roots are being registered, and we are connected to them.
Nosotros, a su vez, los registros, .co en este caso, tiene una relación con registradores, que son los que finalmente van a vender el dominio a los usuarios finales y lo hacen directamente o lo hacen a través de intermediarios que se llaman resellers en el mercado, en donde la gente normalmente compra el dominio con otros servicios de valor agregado. que son puestos al servicio de los usuarios de Internet por estos actores en la industria. Finalmente, en el caso del dominio colombiano, de acuerdo a la ley adoptada, a la resolución adoptada por Colombia, es aplicable la jurisdicción legal colombiana a la asignación de todos los dominios .co en el país. Esta es una muy rápida diapositiva que quiero solamente presentarles en Colombia cómo funciona hoy en día el tema de la ciberseguridad de acuerdo a política pública definida por el Gobierno Nacional. Hay una comisión intersectorial que básicamente la dirige el presidente de la República y casi todos sus ministros. Hay un centro colombiano global de manejo de incidentes que se llama el COLCERT, del cual dependen otras dos organizaciones fundamentales del gobierno colombiano. Una es el Comando Conjunto Cibernético del Ejército de Colombia, que mira los temas de ciberdefensa específicamente, y luego la otra es el tema que maneja el Centro Cibernético de la Policía, que mira los temas de delitos informáticos para actuar en función del cumplimiento de las acciones de ley. Y entonces, ¿para qué traía esto? Para decirles cómo nos relacionamos nosotros con todos estos actores de la industria. Nosotros, como .co, siendo parte de este conjunto de actores múltiples que están, como decía Rodrigo de la Parra, como parte interesada en el proceso, hemos estado muy activos ahí. Tenemos un acuerdo con el Ministerio de Defensa, aparte del contrato que tenemos con el Ministerio de las TIC. El acuerdo con el Ministerio de la Defensa implica el intercambio de información permanente sobre la actividad maliciosa que hay en el dominio para que alimente de manera importante y el desarrollo de las funciones de inteligencia al COLCERT, al Centro Cibernético de la Policía y al Comando Conjunto del Ejército, de manera que también siendo el dominio colombiano parte de la infraestructura crítica tenga ese nivel de contribución y manejo. Pero a su vez vinculamos al proceso a todos los registradores y resellers, en donde también en cadena caen los registrantes a través de leyes, artículos contractuales que trasladan hacia ellos las responsabilidades en la gestión y la administración del dominio. Tenemos algunas actividades específicas que es acciones de rápido cumplimiento del dominio que nos han permitido básicamente actuar o solicitar se actúe muy rápidamente por parte de los registrantes en acciones en donde identificamos lo que en principio hemos tenido cubierto dentro de la ley de delitos informáticos en Colombia, acciones de robo de identidad, de captura de información por parte de la actividad maliciosa y distribución en general de malware, entre otras. Lo que no hacemos nosotros en ninguna manera es suplantar a la autoridad ni tampoco llevar casos específicamente antes de que sean juzgados cuando estos deban ser llevados a las autoridades competentes. Y dentro de ese campo vale la pena, por ejemplo, hemos tenido también el reconocimiento tanto en Colombia de la Policía, el Ejército, el Ministerio TIC por la información que se ha compartido, gracias, un minuto, y como de entidades internacionales, que aquí, por ejemplo, rescatamos una nota que nos plantean que están muy agradecidos porque se ha prestado colaboración en detener a través de una acción conjunta con las entidades de cumplimiento de la ley, en este caso fue la Interpol y la Policía Nacional de Colombia, la suspensión de más de 300 sitios que habían sido reportados para la venta de medicamentos en línea de manera ilegal. Nosotros colaboramos muy rápidamente en eso y se suspendieron esos dominios a raíz de solicitud de la autoridad competente en Colombia. Todo esto, como lección aprendida, a nosotros nos ha dejado que es crítica la colaboración en lo que corresponde a los diferentes actores interesados. Nosotros, como parte consciente de la infraestructura crítica nacional en temas cibernéticos, hemos encontrado un espacio muy claro de participación y hemos estado trabajando de esa manera muy cerca con las autoridades colombianas en procurar que el dominio colombiano ayude a que esa parte en Colombia mantenga un nivel de confianza, de estabilidad y una capacidad de resiliencia adecuada y correspondiente a la responsabilidad que hay por toda la información y en general confianza de la autoridad de los usuarios de Internet en el dominio. Bueno, por ahora los dejo con eso, estaremos abiertos a responder mucha información y eso es lo que hasta ahora hemos trabajado. Gracias.
We'll go right into Iván's presentation. You have the floor.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias por
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. My participation in this panel is to talk a little bit about the importance of regulations in terms of cybersecurity. We need a legal framework in order to guarantee cybersecurity or any type of security in any type of environment. But I would like to talk a little bit about Colombia's experience and how we have managed this multi-stakeholder model in order to get the whole government involved in the formulation of norms and regulations to support all sectors that are involved in the Internet. So I would like to provide you with some background information. I think this is the same for every country. Then applicable laws in the country, also the Colombian cybersecurity strategy, and future challenges. And don't worry, because I speak very fast. In terms of background information, I would like to say that that Colombia has signed a document that has economic and social policy. It's the National Council of Social and Economic Policy, Compass 3701. And this document includes all the guidelines about cybersecurity in Colombia. It was issued in 2011. And with this public policy, Colombia became one of the first countries in Latin America to develop a framework of legal intentions in terms of cyber defense and cybersecurity. This document aims at minimizing risks for citizens and minimizing their exposure to attacks in the cyberspace. The risk that we're all exposed to has increased tremendously because of the technology itself, the technology that is supporting our daily lives. We all have access to mobile phones with access to data. We are downloading information continuously, downloading information at home. We are accessing electronic banking continuously. We share personal information, passwords on websites that are not safe or not secure. And many times we're not even aware of whether the security policy of a specific site is enough or not. The thing is, we are increasingly exposed to security problems. Only in Colombia, just to give you some figures, these are from the National Police from 2014. In 2014, around 13,604 pages that had to do with child pornography were blocked. Luckily, that figure is 8% less than what had been blocked the year before. So somehow this policy is having an effect. 6,300 attacks were identified, and more than almost 9,000 attacks were reported. 87% had to do with individuals, normal individuals, everyday citizens. 8% was related to banks, and the rest was government agencies, communications, energy, health, or education entities. Therefore, the threat is constant and is against any type of industry of the economy or any type of person, actually. And this is what this shows, rather, is that there is culture around security. It's not only about individuals who do not really pay attention about whether there is enough security to protect our information or not and protect ourselves, but also companies themselves do not have clear policies to guarantee that the information of those people related to the company is secure. So there are very wide security systems, but not only at a country level. We need to make sure that we share those systems in between countries, and we need also regional systems and policies, security systems and policies. Today, we have information on the cloud, for example, and who of us can say exactly where our information is? We don't know. If security policies are distributed and depend on the country where we are or where the information or the databases, we don't really know what the policy, what security policy applies to our information. That's why ideally we should have shared policies that have supranational coverage. What is the applicable law in Colombia or applicable norms? Can you see it? Well, the applicable norm is everything that the country as a state linked to international treaties has to abide by in terms of security. The first one that I would like to mention is the Budapest Convention. It's an old one, but Colombia decided to ask to the Council of Ministers of the European Union to be part of this convention. And after that, we have also all the norms from the OAS through its specialized agencies, SICT and CITEL, that have to be respected in the country. And then norms in Colombia that have to do with crimes and thefts that have to apply also in the case of cyberspace. Something else that I would like to mention is that we need input from the community as a whole. What type of feedback are we getting from the different economic industries with regards to the security policies? The cybersecurity strategy in Colombia was established in this document, CONPES 3705, that I already mentioned. Like Camilo said, or rather what Eduardo said, excuse me, Camilo is the brother. Basically, what COMPES says is that security has to be managed by 3 entities that work in a coordinated manner. One of it is the COLCERT. The other one is the Joint Cybersecurity Command of the Armed Forces. And then there's also an interinstitutional commission. This is what COMPES said. In practice, in theory, but in practice, the directives come from the intersectorial committee, and that includes all the different government agencies that have anything to do with cybersecurity or security as a whole. Afterwards, what was called, or rather, that part that had to do with the military forces and cybersecurity, that part was divided into 2. They decided to have a specialized entity on national cybersecurity in cyberspace, and another unit that was linked to the police in order to protect citizens from attacks in the cyberspace. That's why we have 3 entities, and there's coordination among these entities through the COLCERT. The COLCERT is the one that coordinates all the activities with these other 3 entities. And everything is in the hands of the Ministry of Defense, the police and the armed forces. The Interinstitutional Commission includes 7 main actors. The first one is the National Planning Department. They are responsible for publishing and supporting anything that has to do with policies. They coordinate the drafting of the COMPES document, and all the other stakeholders have to take care of their own part under COMPES the COMPES directives. Then the one that plays the larger role is the Ministry of Defense. They are in charge of organizing all the response teams of defense and research on cyber attacks. identify infrastructures at risk, critical risk, and also contribute to training efforts at all levels together with the ITC Ministry and the National Education Ministry in order to reach different sectors and train people on the different risks that cyberspace poses or that exist in cyberspace. Then we have the Ministry of Justice. They are responsible for the whole legal framework to address and criminalize actions. The law is based on physical crimes with physical evidence. Therefore, the whole legal framework has to be adjusted in order to be able to carry out the right type of investigation in a digital environment. Then we have the ITC Ministry, which supports critical infrastructure and develops security norms for these types of infrastructure in order to avoid vulnerabilities. And then we have the Commission, the Regulatory Commission for Telecommunications Operators, that they provide the necessary legal framework. Then we have the Attorney General's Office. They have to train their personnel in order to investigate digital crimes. And then we have the Foreign Affairs Ministry, which supports all the other ministries in order to, through Colombia's adherence to international treaties. Result. Well, the different teams that the Compass created come up with recommendations, and then with recommendations for everything regarding cybersecurity. What are our future challenges? We have to continue to work hard in terms of cybersecurity. There is already a document that has been published, and we're receiving feedback. And with this document, we're strengthening everything that has to do with cyber security. It's focused on network security, protection of users' data, and all the different proceedings to carry out investigations of digital crimes. All this needs to be strengthened in order to be able to guarantee that there's security, as well as to make sure that in the event of a crime being committed, it's prosecuted. Then, in terms of future challenges, we need to exchange information with best practices. We need to develop the right norms, and they need to be discussed with all the stakeholders in the internet environment in order to be able to develop a better legal framework or to maintain it up to date. Thank you.
I have a huge joke to share with all of you at the end of all the presentations. I just have to prove my theory first. I'll now ask Tracy just to present, and then I'll give a summary before you could ask your questions to frame everything for you. Tracy?
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks to the OAS and Olga, Adrian, and the partners for holding such a wonderful event. It's great to be here. So I'm trying to take a little different perspective and maybe take you maybe a little more abstract into what this topic should really be looking at in terms of dimensions of multi-stakeholderism and cybersecurity. First thing I want to just point out is that we are all multi-stakeholders. Just think about it for a second. Everybody here probably has a job or they're a student somewhere, but they're also a user. So just from the very outset, you yourself are wearing multiple hats, and therefore you yourself have a role to play in cybersecurity. But the other things that we need to look at is exactly what cybersecurity means and what it is in terms of looking at challenges for our countries. I'm going to take a special focus on small islands and maybe have a little discussion about that with my colleagues from the region after. So, cybersecurity has peculiar challenges for small island states. In our countries, I'm not sure if it's the same in all the other countries in Latin America, but the issues we face are related to social economic dislocation. As a matter of fact, cybersecurity and cybercrime as an issue is not very different from crime as a whole. We have a lot of emerging factors in terms of breeding grounds for new criminals coming to the fore with the new technologies that are emerging. And we are, in some parts of the Caribbean becoming fertile grounds for cyber terrorists. As you may have heard, some of the countries in the region are providing fighters to the ISIS cause in the Middle East. As well in the Caribbean, we have a series of cultural contestations that are constantly affecting us from our historical conditions, and our ethnic conflicts often come to the surface in sort of a contestation of cultures over time. We also need to look at whether security and the subjectivity of security, whether the power of security can be used to both protect and control. And of course, in the Caribbean, we have high technological barriers. There are limited resources, human, technical, and financial. And of course, we are disadvantaged geopolitically and geographically. So in a nutshell, there are some key challenges that are faced by the small islands in the Caribbean, and I'm sure in other areas in the world, the Pacific areas, and so on as well. So what does that mean for us as a territory? Is it in fact a mirror of the real world? Now, we do know that crime is growing at unprecedented high rates in the world, and in particular in the region. We are seeing increasing access to criminal and technological sophistication, and increasing new tools that are emerging as the technology develops, and we try to do something that protects against it. The next day, something emerges. We are seeing increasing emergence of social networks and the entire social dynamic as a breeding ground for what we call carriers, or even safe harbors or predatory boot camps. So to a large extent, these social networks and social environments are creating almost a new breed of criminals that are finding a way to display their wares. And how do we reconcile the fact that human behavior is inherently unpredictable and irrational, despite the best social, psychological, and economic theories protect same? I think that's one of the things we have to look at when we understand what cybersecurity and multi-stakeholderism is going to be dealing with. So not just simply about the surface levels, but what are we doing about the understanding of human behavior and the psychological and economic aspects of that. Can we logically separate and analyze cybercrime and cyber deviance from real world crime? That's a question that we have to understand and we have to look at very carefully. Is cybercrime and cybersecurity, are they disconnected from real world security and crime and criminal issues? Are they? And will the evolving definitions of privacy and its correlated security ensure that we continue to fail in addressing these issues? I think Vincent would have mentioned, I'm not sure if he mentioned it in this session, but that the definition of privacy has changed over the last 50 to 60 years. When we put things online today, there are certain things we put online today that we wouldn't have thought of putting on the public 10 years ago. Our birth dates out there, our marital status is publicly known. All these things are happening without much thought has changed. And the definition of privacy has in fact changed over the last 50 years. And just to reiterate this complexity of cybersecurity, so we need to look at the issue around 4 key areas, like what I call the 4 key dynamics, or the 4 key quadrants: social, behavioral, economic, psychological and cultural, and technological, as well as to see how a law and legal enforcement paradigm can treat with these dynamics and these quadrants. So in terms of understanding how multi-stakeholderism can treat with cybersecurity, we need to look carefully at all of these dimensions and these quadrants to ensure that every aspect of criminal behavior and deviant behavior, and in fact cybercrime and cybersecurity, are looked at. Otherwise we'll be failing. We'll be just, as we call it in Ballpark, cutting off our nose to spite our faces. We'll constantly be behind the 8 ball trying to deal with this issue without truly understanding what is causing cybersecurity breaches, or what is causing cybercrime incidences. Now there's a particular initiative that has emerged in the Commonwealth region, and that's the Commonwealth, for those who don't know, approximately 50 countries that used to be colonized by the UK. and they are English-speaking, and they are predominantly composed of or comprised of developing countries, a lot of island states, a lot of African states, a lot of least developed countries. But what we are seeing there are certain things that we can look at in terms of addressing cybercrime, addressing cybersecurity. There's a shared socio-economic history in the Commonwealth, and there are shared or similar legal systems. That's an interesting point to look at. In this project, there are over 30 agencies and organizations working together from all different perspectives, and I think you'd have heard in the previous presentations the multiple agencies required to deal with the issue. But in particular, there are 30 agencies in this situation. What this project attempts to do is solve a duplication problem. And as opposed to having Agency A coming into your country and dealing with issue B, and Agency C coming in and trying to do the same issue, we're trying to ensure that the whole project or the whole issue is looked at from a comprehensive lens. It's multidisciplinary, multifaceted, and there are shared learnings that are emerging from this initiative. And the evolution of the approach has moved from the local to, in fact, the global and eventually the regional. And what has the CCI taught us to date? That there are certainly more commonalities and differences amongst our countries. That cybersecurity and cybercrime issues cannot be tackled or solved by any one country, any one agency organization, or any one non-governmental stakeholder grouping. And as with real-world issues, we have to treat with all of our stakeholders in ensuring that we are dealing with the problem cohesively. I mentioned previously, not just from a surface level, but from an understanding and from a research and development and analysis level, not just looking at it from enforcement or from legal or from the social side of it, but from all aspects, even down to the psyche of a criminal, the psyche of a human person. What is going on there? And that the addition of cyber or digital to these criminal type issues will in fact require that technical expertise actually is required more so than before to ensure that we treat with the issue very carefully. So those are my few initial points. Happy to take some questions thereafter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tracy. So the quick joke, and then I'll summarize and then we only have time for a few questions because the other panel needs to begin, is before we began, I asked everyone if 5 minutes was sufficient. Everybody's like, yeah, I won't use 5 minutes. On average, each speaker was 12 minutes. Just saying.
Not me.
But just in case you missed it, one of the things that we're looking at for multi-stakeholder, it's not just in the internet governance aspect. As you realize, for cybersecurity, the whole idea of multi-stakeholder comes in from International Cooperation for Capacity Building, based on the presentations made. It comes at the level of national policy development, where you need all actors to actually develop your national policies for cybersecurity. And the third key aspects that came out of the presentation, both from Eduardo and from Iván's experience, is that you need the multi-stakeholder, multi-actor approach for security, to actually manage our top-level domains, to actually take down when there's security issues. So multi-stakeholder, we have to now think of it as a broader perspective. We know it from the ICANN model. We've seen it in IGF. We've seen it at Net Mundial. But it now involves multiple actors. I'll open the floor up for just a few questions. As I said, the other panel needs to begin. Please begin. Sir?
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Mauricio Ortiz.
I am Mauricio Ortiz from Colombia, and I wanted to ask a question. As we saw this issue of the multi-stakeholders, it's very interesting, very important. But in Latin America, I believe that if a company has an incident of cybersecurity, it's not something that will be shared, but hidden. Because in theory, it's important. We don't want others to help us to improve. So what do you think we can do to change this point of view? Because this is the way it is. Thank you.
Eduardo?
Gracias, y lo voy a responder.
Thank you, and I'm going to respond as a Colombian, too. I believe that it is a bit of helping to share our responsibility as citizens in general and to be responsible of building a community where we live. We in Colombia, and I say from personal experience, we have very difficult to accept these type of responsibilities, and we think that it is up to others to care for our actions. One thing that has helped me understand this is not to think that others are going to do it, and try in any space where I am to see how I can help. How can I contribute in some way to build this cybersecurity space at the personal level or the corporation level too? We should do more of a career. We should have that. Everyone should understand that the security starts at home. Each one should feel responsible in the security, and this is going to help the general process of keeping our security in general.
Sí, muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I am Leonardo Huertas, and I currently work for a telephone company, Iván, and for 20 years I worked for the Colombian government. Of course, I'm Colombian. And I would like to ask a short question on the Compass 701, which is about to end. I think it already has ended. But as far as the three cases, I'd like to say, of those that were mentioned in the panel, the organization in charge of coordinating cybersecurity and press is CONCEP, which is called the Emergency Response Group of Cybernet in Colombia. At the beginning, it was thought that it would be only a coordination entity because of the needs of the company, but the role of cyber defense as such is not done by the Army, but the Joint Cybernetic Command that is led by the General Command of the Unitary Forces, which in our country is not a military force per se, but it is the coordination of that which is the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force of our country. And this organization is in charge of defending our country in the cybernetic field and acting operationally on this issue, very much coordinated, in fact, with CONCER and with the critical infrastructure in our country. And on the other hand, this police cybernetic center is in charge of protecting the cyber crime. The last point I wanted to make was that there is an intersectorial committee that that will look at the guidelines given to these three organizations, especially CONCER, so that one way or another the government, and in a transverse way, will influence the cyber defense considerations in the country, and so that it will not be a completely decision of the ministry, national ministry. And to finish my presentation, and then I will ask you forgiveness for taking so much time, I wanted to say that COMP 7701 has been reduced to perform in three areas. First, international cooperation, where the OAS and SIGTEL specifically were or is a very important part, where our country owes them very much for the great support given. Second was the issue of cooperating at the international level that was led by the Foreign Affairs Ministry of the country, and the other one was of training and education. Or when I say I refer to the fact that it was decided to include everyone, from the everyday person and going through to managers and training also the prosecutors and the judges so that the crime won't only be followed by the police, but it would also be judged. That's what I wanted to contribute. Thank you.
Good afternoon. All right, so we have a question from Ashel Ford. It's for Tracy. You mentioned in your presentation that the expert technical community must be consulted in order to solve issues of cybersecurity. How, in your opinion, can we form working, meaningful partnerships between decision makers and technical experts, especially in small island states where these groups tend not to intersect at all?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question. It's not, I think, only related to the small island states, but I think generally across the world we do have challenges in linking our regional technical experts in a meaningful and cohesive way. I think for the Caribbean region in particular, and for small island states in a broader perspective, there are currently ways that we can do this via public international organizations that do assist. So I know the OAS has some programs that they have been starting in the region that we can link up with. And for example, the Anti-Phishing Working Group has been doing a lot of work with the region as well, with the White Hats in terms of trying to get those experts together. I think it's also important for the regional experts to work through their existing structures. So in the region we have CaribNOG, where there are issues being addressed there that are very technical from a network level. And as you ramp it up a little further to the CARICOM level, we can take it up to policy and perhaps even at governmental level. So I think it's best to use the existing structures to treat with the issue as opposed to creating a new one, and perhaps use the international organizations to assist. I'm sure they'll be very looking forward to assist in that regard. Thank you.
All right, I'd have to wrap up. I wanted to summarize the session just by saying that I want to challenge the school to think about multi-stakeholder from a very different perspective, not just the bottom-up approach, but widen your perspective to see that this approach can be used for policy development, it can be used for enforcement, it could be used for governance of cybersecurity within national framework. Always remember that the legitimacy of the process is based on the results of the process. We've seen that it worked for ICANN for the production of the report to go for the IANA transition, and it's something that is a successful model. I want you to just join with me just to thank our esteemed panelists by just saying thank you.